Hello everyone. John 8:24. Therefore I said to you that you will die in your sins, for unless you believe that I am, you will die in your sins. So in Trinity world, we're supposed to imagine that Jesus is using the divine name in this verse to identify himself as God. I am, ego, I, me. What Trinitarians are exactly thinking in their head is a bit difficult to explain because it's not clear. What did Jesus say exactly here? Something like, unless you believe that Yahweh, or something like that. If you just stop and think about what they're actually suggesting, it doesn't make any sense. Nevertheless, you don't care about those kind of things in Trinity world. You just resort to your imaginations like you always do and pretend that Jesus is using the divine name here to identify himself. He doesn't say, I am God or I am Yahweh. It doesn't say, unless you believe that I am Yahweh or I am God or anything like that. You're supposed to believe this is the divine name, and somehow Jesus is identifying himself as that divine being, which the text doesn't even say that. Even if this was the divine name, it still wouldn't say that. But in their minds, they do these mental gymnastics, and that's how it comes out. They don't really care to read it in its context either. It doesn't matter to them. Here's a question. At John 8:58, you often hear Trinitarians claim that the Jews knew immediately that Jesus was using the divine name and using the divine name to identify himself. Same thing here. Ego, I, me. How come the Jews didn't pick up stones to kill him? Why aren't the Jews immediately recognizing this as the divine name and going, wait a minute, he's claiming to be God, let's kill him? That's not what happens. They don't even raise an eyebrow. Here's their response. So they were saying to him, who are you? Okay. So Jesus says, unless you believe that I am, you will die in your sins. They don't understand what he's talking about, so they say, well, who are you? And Jesus has a response. Jesus said to them, what I said to you at the beginning. Throughout this chapter, you'll see that the Jews are kind of deaf and dumb and blind. And Jesus says, you can't hear what I'm saying because you are not of God. Jesus is informing them of all kinds of things here. And they're just deaf. They're stone deaf. They don't hear what he's saying. So what did Jesus say to them at the beginning? He says, unless you believe that I am, you will die in your sins. And they said to him, who are you? And he said, what I told you at the beginning. What did he tell them at the beginning? Then Jesus again spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. They asked Jesus, who are you? And he says, what I told you at the beginning. What did he say at the beginning? I am the light of the world. Now, Jesus tells us what he's talking about. Like the Jews, the Trinitarians are stone deaf to what he says. So let's just read what he told us, what Jesus told us. Then Jesus again spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. Unless you believe that I am, you will die in your sins. You see how simple that was? You don't get to do that in Trinity world. You don't get to use your head. You always have to use your imagination and resort to your Trinitarian fancies for the sake of your Trinitarian idol, the idol of false prophets. Really simple. We're told what's going on here. Jesus explains it. He says, I am the light of the world. And he explains himself. And then he says, unless you believe that I am, you'll die in your sins. And they go, who are you? He says, what I told you at the beginning. I am the light of the world. Unless you believe that I am, you'll die in your sins. And Jesus goes on to talk about this more a few verses later. So Jesus was saying to those Jews who had believed him, if you continue in my word, then you are truly disciples of mine, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. They answered him, we are Abraham's descendants and have never been enslaved to anyone. How is it you say you will become free? Jesus answered them, truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who commits sin is the slave of sin. Everyone who commits sin is the slave of sin. Not everyone else, but everyone. The slave does not remain in the house forever. The son does remain to the age. Okay. Jesus is explaining throughout this chapter that there are two witnesses, he and the Father who is abiding in him. And the Father abiding in him, the Spirit of the Father, tells him what to say. And that's why Jesus is the light of the world. He explains this. He spends the whole chapter 8, 12 to 58 explaining this. Jews don't hear him. Trinitarians, for the most part, don't hear Jesus here. And Jesus explains why they don't hear him. But this is why Jesus is the light of the world. And unless you believe that he is the light of the world, you will die in your sins. Why is that? Well, he says, if you continue in my word, you are truly my disciples. Jesus explains here and throughout the Gospel of John that his words are not his own, but the Father's who sent him. His teaching isn't his, it's the Father's. And so if you don't believe Jesus, you don't believe God, God the Father, because he came in the Father's name. You're basically rejecting God the Father. And that's one of the main things we're supposed to see in John 8 here, is that the Jews are rejecting God the Father, who they claim is their God. It just really illustrates how crazy these Jews are. Unless you believe that I am, you will die in your sins. But if you continue in my word, those who believe, you are truly Jesus' disciples. You'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free. You'll have this light of life that Jesus is talking about. So, it's pretty clear what Jesus was talking about at John 8:24. Jesus is the light of the world. And unless you believe that he is the light of the world, you will die in your sins. Just once again, we have one of these situations where the people in Trinity world have been mind conditioned and brainwashed to just sort of go with their imaginations which they so often do, rather than look at the text, the context, and appreciate what it's trying to tell you. They don't really care what it's trying to tell you, actually. They only care about trying to promote their Trinity idol. Something you just don't want to do if you purport to be a Christian. God bless you.